Hi, everyone, and welcome to the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast, where entrepreneurs help entrepreneurs grow faster, better, and stronger in the green industry. From leadership to sales to recruiting and operational excellence, we cover the topics holding entrepreneurs back and share how to get past those bottlenecks with the best in the industry. I'm your host, Rob Murray, co founder and CEO of Intrigue, a digital marketing company focused on helping landscape companies grow. So sit back and enjoy the show. Well, hi, everyone, we got episode 4 here on the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast, and I have the privilege of welcoming our guest, Jim Landry, Executive Director of Landscape New Brunswick. Thank you, Jim, for doing this.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a privilege. I'll talk to anybody, but I get you.
Expectation setting, right? We got to keep this real.
Yeah.
We had the opportunity to talk, obviously, before this. I'm excited for the conversation. I think you're going to be able to provide a lot of insight, not only for your members, but for landscapers, all over Canada and the U.S. So Jim's been, or is currently the executive director of Landscape New Brunswick, has been part of the association since what, 2006?
Likely even longer than that, perhaps.
Okay.
Maybe around the turn of the century.
Right. So can you just give the audience a quick orientation around what were you doing before and what got you involved in the association?
Okay, let's go back to when I was maybe 15 and in high school, and I went to work for a greenhouse in the neighborhood of St. John, New Brunswick, where I lived. And I worked there for probably 7 or 8 years. I might have done 2 shorter terms there. I can't quite remember, but it was my introduction to landscape horticulture, or really just basic horticulture. It was a greenhouse. We grew cut flowers and we grew poinsettias for the markets here locally. And it really piqued an interest in me that's something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I mean, it started because it was close by. That's the reason I took the job, but I quickly fell in love with it. Working in a greenhouse is probably the best environment that you could find to work in if you live in Eastern Canada or in a northern climate, because you're in a greenhouse in the wintertime where it's nice and warm. And it smells like stuff is growing in the middle of winter. It's very tropical. But thinking back, I'm thinking maybe some of the smells were chemicals, maybe some paraquat, some things that we ban the use of today. But it was that nice.
That might explain some things, maybe.
Good, very well, yeah. But so then I decided while I was working there that I would take some correspondence courses from the University of Guelph, and that kind of kept me on that career path. I was supported by my employer. He helped pay for it. In the meantime, I got married. So at that time, I didn't really want to go away to university. So it gave me the opportunity to learn while I worked. It took me 4 years, I think, to get through the program. Generally, it's a 3 to 5 year program. It still exists. When we did it, it was on microfilm or microfiche, whatever it was called, these tiny little projectors that you look through. So the media has changed a bit. I bet it's easier to learn, but content's probably similar. And from there, I worked, it's the only job I've ever worked at. When I say job, I mean in the field of horticulture. I went to work for a local nursery, 25 minutes from here, hour and 15-minute bicycle ride. So I could bicycle back and forth to work. So I worked in a garden center / nursery / landscape contracting facility. So, and I worked there for 30 years. And I love virtually every minute of it. I like working outside. I like working with the people that were both the people I worked with and the customers we dealt with. I mean, maybe things have changed. I don't know. I've been away from it for 15 years, but it was a happy place. Customers were happy, workers were happy, even though sometimes the weather was terrible. We worked in the rain, but to see people happy in that context really solidified my love for the profession. And now when I talk to young people about entering the profession, I explain to them, you're going to work outside in the rain and the mud, and you're going to love it. Because where people go immediately when you think about working outside in the elements, some people's minds immediately go to, well, that's a harsh, terrible environment, but it's not really. And it's not about the environment, it's about the clothes you wear. So you dress warm, and at the end of the day, you have a nice warm fire to set beside. It's wonderful.
Very cool. And then what got you involved in the association?
Well, I was working, actually going back to when I worked in the greenhouse, the company that I worked for, the owner He was very involved with all the different associations associated with horticulture. Like
Mhm.
we had a greenhouse growers group here. He was very involved, and that kind of set the stage for me. And then when I worked at the nursery for the 30 years, my employer, he was a founding member of Landscape New Brunswick and got me involved immediately with some of the committee work, and we did some things together. It was very rewarding, and it really opened my eyes. I mean, my eyes really opened when I started participating on the national level and the international level. It just to see what landscape horticulture could be outside of a small province like New Brunswick. Not that New Brunswick and the smaller provinces and smaller centers can't be movers and shakers,
Right.
but to be able to see how things operate first off in British Columbia or Ontario, and then at the national level and the international level, you do immediately feel part of it. You do feel like you're a mover and a shaker, but you get to see what you're moving and shaking. You get to see the big picture.
Well,
So,
and I think that's a really interesting perspective. And I'm going to come back to, your, getting to the spot of being an executive director for this association. But one of the things I think you just touched on, which is really important, I think for a lot of people listening too, like, a lot of people, may or may not be part of an association. But even if they are, they're not necessarily involved, right?
right.
So can you speak a little bit about what you just said there about like, how getting involved helped you be part of it?
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And I'm glad you brought that up, because joining the association wants you to join because they want your money, first and foremost.
Sure. Yeah. Fees never hurt.
That's right. Yeah. We have to pay the executive director. So
yeah, very important priority.
bear that in mind. It's very important. But beyond that, what we really want you to get out of it is not just the discount on the trucks and some of the training programs we put on, or helping you get involved with Red Seal. We want you to get engaged and do some work for the association, because and that's your own self-interest too. So if you've got an issue that you need help with, probably 50% of the population of your colleagues have the same problem.
If
and
not
you
more.
can band together and you can work on it together. And that's the rewarding part of it. And once you become engaged, it's kind of like a virus. It spreads and it just gets, I was going to say worse, but I'm going to say better instead. It just gets better and better. And you do put a lot of effort into it. I mean, going back to historically how I got involved, I've been involved with Landscape New Brunswick for maybe 25 or 30 years. I started as a volunteer. I was on committees. I chaired committees. I was vice president. I was president, past president, and now I've gotten this great job as executive director. But I haven't forgotten about the path that I took to get here, and how it grew me both as a person and as a professional person. I want to pass that on to the young people that are coming on now. Is get involved with the association, do something, start small, get on a committee. You've got an issue, bring that to the forefront, and we help solve it.
Yeah,
and
that's
then you
cool.
go on and solve other problems.
There's two ideas that come to mind when you talk about this path that you've been on, and one of them is idea that it's cliche to say be the change you want to see in the world. That's a cliche. It's not cliche to do it.
That's right.
Few people do.
Right.
And I think the associations like Landscape New Brunswick and all the provinces in the states and the national level actually give people an opportunity to make the change they want to see. Yeah. So, if you happen to be complaining about something, there's an opportunity for you to stop if you want.
That's right.
And I think it's just really powerful, especially at an association level. And maybe you can speak to this from watching not only yourself and your experience, but others get involved. When you're running your own business, you're on an island, and you're trying to learn from maybe books and speakers and your own mistakes. But once you start getting into like committees and involved in the association, you start to become around other leaders who are leading change in the industry. And so you don't have to figure it all out on your own. You've got this enormous support network. And then you start to surround yourself around these epic humans. And I think there's a really cool saying around the idea that you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with most. And you start hanging out with the best in the industry. And all of a sudden, what does they say? The rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah, it's a funny expression, because I think some of those ships have holes in them and they sink. But anyway, it's counter to the point you're making. It's funny because I got a call last night from one of our members who asked me about a meeting that's going on in Vancouver in September. And this is a meeting of both the Canadian Professional Association and the European one.
Oh, cool.
And it's a
So
big deal.
global.
It's global. And she said, how can I get involved with that? She was sent an e-bulletin that said, this is going on. If you want to come, here's an opportunity. And we just went back and forth. And I told her, I said, if you go to this, you're going to come back a different person. You're going to have a whole new list of contacts and resource people that you can contact if you have an issue. And I'm really hoping we can make this work. It's very expensive. So unless you've got unless you got deep pockets, but there's also money available through funding programs. So my job the rest of today and tomorrow is to see if I can access some funding to help her out. And not only that, but during the course of the conversation, she wants to take one of her employees with her.
Very cool.
I thought, okay, now we're talking something totally different. This is kind of twofold. You're going to gain a whole bunch from this experience, but you're going to gain an employee who is now engaged as well at some level or another and is likely to stick with you. There's probably no statistics, but I'm guessing this person might stick with you 5 years longer than they might have otherwise because you're investing in their future.
Big time.
Yeah.
And growing.
Isn't that wonderful?
Growing leaders around you. So we're
without associations, those opportunities wouldn't avail themselves.
So then what made you in your right mind decide to become executive director? How did you decide to say, you know what, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, I'm not sure I did it in my right mind. I did it in my own mind. Well, I had been a volunteer in the association, which at the end of it, we didn't have an executive director. So I was kind of a volunteer administrator at the same time. And then because I was working in a nursery and a garden center, I devoted my winter activities to the association. So I became a part-time association executive director. And then, I mean, I'm 65. So at the time I was in my 50s, it looked like it was time for me to make a change for the final sprint to the finish line in my career. And I had already been doing this for a while. I really liked it. And I thought I could make this a year-round thing, and work at a desk and travel more. This has given me tremendous opportunity to travel through other associations that are linked to my provincial association and the national association. For example, the International Garden Centers Association that meets all over the world once a year. They have a congress. This year it's in Italy, north of Milan. I've been to South Africa. I've been to England a bunch of times, and I joined them on the tour in Vancouver. So it just seemed like here's an opportunity for me to get away from the heavy lifting. Never really wanted a desk job, but this is only a desk job a couple hours a day. The rest of the time, we operate out of my house. So my office is either my car or in the shop of our members.
So tell me about that. How many members do you have right now with Landscaping Brunswick?
Well, the big number is like around 200. Mm-hmm. And we do represent a very broad commodity grouping. Like we have retailers, which are our garden centers, and our growers, which are either nurseries or greenhouses, landscape designers, and then of course the maintenance and the actual contractors, which make up the biggest part of it. Mm-hmm. And we have members on Prince Edward Island too, so I get to go over there a couple of times a year and meet with them. The big advantage is meeting them in their shop. You really have no idea when somebody joins the association what they do. I mean, they landscape, but are they a truck with a shovel in the back?
Right.
Do they own 3 wheelbarrows? And almost every time I am so surprised when I go and visit their shop. It tells me so much more about them than if they came to my office. The only thing I could determine is, what their dress style is, or shoe size and stuff. Yeah. But to go to the shop and I'm always so impressed with just what they're
all about.
All about.
No, but seriously, right? The physical space that someone curates over time.
Shiny truck. You got a shiny truck. You got a brand new shop. You got nice, clean equipment out there. I look inside your shop and you've got all the tools organized on the wall. It tells me when I see things like that, I know immediately that, this is where they hold their tailgate meetings in the morning. And a lot of times when I visit members, I try to get them to get me to come in so I can talk to their employees at the same time, and I could get to watch their interaction with their employees. And sometimes they'll let me set in on a tailgate session or whatever you want to call it on Friday mornings, when they're going over all the safety issues that they've encountered during the week. And that's when they lay out their training programs for the upcoming week. And that just speaks volumes.
Very cool. So 200 members, P.E.I, New Brunswick. what are you hearing as the biggest growth constraint right now among members over the last, say, 3 to 6 months?
Actually, I could say the same thing about the last 3 to 6 years or the last 3 to 6 decades. It's been HR. It's been HR for a long time. It's probably been HR since the 70s. I know when I went to work at a greenhouse, to me, it was a viable job. It was close by. It was no different than any other job. But I think that now there's not as many people with the same frame of mind that I had. I grew up not on a farm, but I went to my grandparents' farm on the weekends and during the summer holidays. So I had experience with the soil. I like getting my hands dirty. I like climbing trees. There are less of those people, in our population now to meet the number of jobs required in our occupation. So it really hasn't changed. There are aspects of it that have changed. And I mean, we can speak for a few minutes about the temporary foreign workers program as an option for people, but our option has always been, and our best option has always been, hiring people that live in your community. Mm-hmm. People that are already here. And because it's such a great job, I've always, like I said before, working in a greenhouse is the best thing you can do, to get out of the cold winter wind and get inside where it's tropical. They don't use pesticides like they did back in my day. So there's that, you don't have to worry about that so much. But using homegrown local people, and I don't just mean Canadians that have been here for generations. I mean anybody that lives in your neighborhood, whether they just moved in, that's your first choice. It just makes it so much easier. But those numbers have dwindled. They're still dwindling, although I do see kind of an upturn. I work a lot with the Department of Education here in Southern New Brunswick, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of programming in schools that's been lacking for 20 years.
So tell us a bit more about that. Like, what's the association doing to engage the youth with the next kind of wave of staff that can come through into the green industry?
Yeah, we work. There's a new department here in Southern New Brunswick, and maybe there's similar departments in other parts of the country, but it's experiential learning. So there's an experiential learning coordinator in Southern New Brunswick. And when I heard about that, I was on it immediately. I thought, this is exactly what we need. I always went to schools and I'd go and plant a tree and I'd talk about a tree for 20 minutes and then I go home. This is totally different. We develop programming for the kids. And because we're doing it through the Department of Education, it's kind of immediately vetted. So it's not, hey, I'm coming to plant a tree at your school. Can you get the kids outside for an hour? We're coming to your school. We're going to spend a day. These are the outcomes we're going to meet. And we're going to meet a lot of outcomes. And we can show that when we're gone, we can come back and we can meet a whole bunch of outcomes that you might not even have ever thought of. Planting a tree allows you to talk about history. It allows you to talk about math. And of course, it automatically allows you to talk about all the sciences and the soil and the water and the environment.
Oh yeah, it's lights out. So tell us then, what are you seeing in the youth in terms of the response of these kids that you're going and visiting at these schools? What's it like these days?
The kids love it. I mean, there are, depending on whether you're in an urban school or a suburban school or a rural school, you tend to have a totally different audience each time. But these kids get so excited. I'll give you an example. So this is something we did at a school in a small town outside of St. John. We were going to the elementary school to talk about trees. So we brought an arborist around with us. And he talked to the kids for about an hour about trees. And he was 40 feet up the tree and they watched them climb the tree.
Right, so they're just jazzed.
And I asked them at the end, I said, so who wants to be an arborist like Luke? And 100% of the kids. And I thought, well, okay, that's unrealistic. They're not
sure, but it's still, they're enthused.
But even if one of those kids went on to become an arborist because of what they've seen, and maybe another kid might come on to be a horticulturalist or a nurseryman or something else, or a landscape designer or an installer or a maintenance person. If I can get one of each of those categories filled with one person, that we've accomplished our job. And
that's a huge hour.
Just loved it. And when I used to go and plant a tree, it was me planting the tree and lecturing the kids. Well, that's all changed now. I realized a few years ago that that's not what this is about. The kids pick where the tree is going to go. Because
cool. Get them
if I just pick a spot, now I guide them. You know, and whenever a spot is picked, and we talk about why this might not be a good spot, but ultimately there's a couple of kids that know that in their mind that they're picked this spot. They can go home and tell them, we planned on where this is going.
Yeah.
They first wanted to plant it on the roof, but I talked them out of that. But
God
and
bless her
then
imagination, though.
and then they plant it. And as they're planting, we talk about one of the trees that I plant. I have two go-to trees that I plant. If it's a memorial tree, I'll plant a ginkgo, and you can talk to kids about a ginkgo tree all day long. It's
Okay.
the oldest tree. It's got so many unique characteristics. The other one I plant, I got involved with the Vimy Oak project 5 or 6 years ago. And now I collect acorns off the Vimy oaks that we planted around the New Brunswick and P.E.I. And I germinate the acorns and I take them to schools. So we
Cool.
talk about history. We talk about the Canadian Army. We talk about their families. We talk about, oddly enough, this is a stretch, but because I'm planting an English oak, a Vimy oak is not a type of oak. It's
Right.
an English oak. It's an exotic plant. And should we be planting exotic plants?
Oh,
And
cool.
so it opens the conversation to why native trees are important in our landscape, even though this isn't one. If it was one, we might not even talk about it. We might just assume like it doesn't become part of the conversation. But we
Yeah.
ask the question, why are we planting this exotic plant? And we can talk about why it's not as beneficial to the environment as the native plant.
So then tell me a bit more. Like, are you seeing any members successfully engaging youth and like taking in co-ops, internships? Like, are you seeing some folks that are like getting on board with this type of
Yes.
programming?
Yes. Yeah. I don't think anymore that things happen immediately. Like everything starts as a groundswell, but I do see a change
Well, like an
occurring.
acorn, it doesn't take, a day to turn into a tree, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
so
English oaks are a little different. They germinate quite quickly and they
oh,
become trees.
whatever, but still, it takes a while for that thing to get going. And so, can you give us some examples, or maybe there's a story or two you've seen of people getting some wins out of these? Like, because if we break down HR into a couple buckets, right? There's recruiting, getting new people on. There's onboarding and coaching and training. There's developing people into leaders, and then there's the letting go, retaining, but like the opposite, so attrition. So we talk about recruiting, engaging the youth. We're looking at people that are in our local communities as our first, place we want to be looking at, regardless of how long they've been there, but people around us for sure.
Mhm.
Then we got the youth that we want to engage. Have you seen any stories of late that maybe you can share with us around somebody getting some success out of co-op or internship programs?
Yes. One thing that has to happen before the companies will get engaged is they have to start making concessions. And 10 years ago, they wouldn't have made the concession. So here's an example. You've got this guy, he's 15 years old and he wants to come and work for you, but he can't drive a car.
Right.
So 10, 15 years ago, you might say, well, I can't hire this guy. He doesn't have a car. He has no way to get to work. Maybe I'm desperate for workers, or I'm in a real need. Maybe that's a better way to put it. I have a real need for more employees. So maybe I need to send one of my guys around to pick them up in the morning and take them to the job site and
Sure.
drop them off at night. Or maybe I just use them in job sites that are close by his place, or, maybe I have conversations with his parents. So you make those concessions now where you might not have before. And maybe he can only work for 4 hours a day. Maybe it's part of a program that he's in the school where he still has to attend school. So you build that into your business plan. You make sure that he's always working with a capable supervisor and someone who's going to not only teach him how to do it, but inspire him so that he wants to learn more and he wants to stay on. And then when he's done his school program, he's maybe a 15-year employee after that.
Right.
Maybe if he hangs around long enough, he takes your business over. That's becomes your succession plan. One thing that I've noticed that has changed, and it's kind of reverting back, but for a long time, there's no way your kids were going to take your business. Like that was the last thing in their mind. They go to university and they come back with the goal of avoiding taking over or working in your business at all costs. And now I do see that changing. But in the meantime, your best person to buy your business was your employee.
Right.
So you got to keep him on long enough where he's either too old or his back hurts so much that he's not going to get a job working for someone else. He's going to stick with you to the end, and then he's going to buy your business and you're going to move on.
So succession, I want to come back to that in a minute, because I think that's a pretty big topic these days, especially with the amount of businesses that are going to change hands or shut down, right? Like there's really only two outcomes. One is someone else takes over or you close it all down. But one of the things I've heard time and time again in the green industry the last, 12, 18, even 24 months, and to your point about, maybe even decades around HR being the biggest issue, finding the people to fulfill the work and do a great job. And recruiting is always what seems to become part of the conversation, but there's this other part that people don't necessarily talk about, which is retention. And what does it take to keep people, developing their skill sets, growing them as leaders. And there seems to be this like double-edged sword of like, well, I going to go train my competition in that they're going to go start their own business, or they're going to leave me and go somewhere else for an extra dollar. Why would I go put that time, effort, and energy dollars into somebody when they're just going to leave, versus I'm going to grow everybody I can around me. I'm going to build a culture that doesn't depend on me. And then I'm going to be able to get away. I'm going to have such good retention that my recruitment numbers don't matter nearly as much. Can you
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit for us, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, that's a cultural thing. And when I observe the businesses across Canada that are very successful and do such a great job, their culture is all about training and engagement. It's not about a 40-hour work week and a paycheck at the end. It's about how can I get this person more and more engaged. And when I look back over my history, my life, and the profession I've been involved in, I don't know any other professions, but it was the employers that kept me engaged. They allowed me to take more training. They supported any training I wanted to take. When I developed a bit of an interest in our association, remember I said my employer at one time was a founding member of Landscape New Brunswick. He encouraged me to do it, and I thought that's he knows he's not just there to provide me with a paycheck. He knows he's there to keep me on this career path because it's beneficial to him as well, not just me. So.
And do you see any members right now in your membership that are like doing, like, you can see a keen focus on growing people and,
Oh yeah.
and success that comes? Can you kind of give us a story?
Yeah, I mean, I have firsthand knowledge of that because I know all of the companies that have their employees engaged, because when we host a training session, these are the guys that send people to them on a consistent basis.
So tell us about that then. Tell us about the staff that come to these sessions. Like, are they on their phones the whole time, disengaged, they don't want to be there? Are they chomping at the bit, super pumped that they got the time given to them by an employer to go grow themselves? Like, what does that look like?
Bit of both.
Okay, so
I
talk
mean,
to me about it.
well, at that point, the engagement is on us. Like, it's our job to keep them engaged. It's our job to hire people to come in and do a good job of presenting. We've had some pretty boring presentations that I fallen asleep on, and it's funny because
Fair enough, me too.
The guy I worked for, he had a reputation of falling asleep at every session we ever did. We have pictures of sessions back for the past 20 years, and if he's in the picture, he's sleeping. So, but really our goal, and maybe that's where I learned that you really need to keep people engaged and, keep the activity live and ongoing. And I know, like, the trade shows that I go to now, they're very much about an engagement, like Landscape Ontario's Congress with the hardscape. Can't remember what it's called, but there's the live hardscape thing that's going on.
Oh yeah.
There's all kinds of activities that are literally hands-on. And I think that's important. The social aspect is important. I mean, you're bringing these people not only to learn about the subject that's being taught to them, but also to learn from the people that are sitting around the table.
Sure, yeah, the connection themselves with peers.
That's right. And when you go for supper, if the different groups, I mean, maybe they're talking about their pets, but they're making a connection. And now you've got someone you can go to has some like interests that you have. You have similar interests, and maybe that totally off-topic conversation sparks a connection that you can utilize in your professional life at some point.
Yeah, well, and not to mention the value that it brings to your life in its entirety, being able to be exposed with other cool people that have similar interests.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one question at the end. Before I do, you mentioned succession. Engage employees long enough so that they have no choice but to buy your business. Those aren't your words, but that's the essence.
Well, that was my thought.
Yeah. So what are you seeing right now with regard to succession, in terms of people that are setting themselves up well, or, some of the common mistakes that people are making currently to not get themselves set up for succession planning?
Yeah, whoever's going to take over your business, I mean, they're seeing how your business operates every day on a daily basis. They see how you interact with your customers. They see how you interact with your employees. So I think to keep that positive all the time, and I think maybe that's what happened through the turn of the century and 2010 to 2019, where a lot of the companies were overworked. There was a big transition going on with the introduction of a lot of new equipment. It was tough, and they seen the long hours that their boss was putting in or the owner was putting in, and all of the frustration. And now when I look at, if I pick my 10 favorite members. And when I say favorite, I mean the ones that I really think have got it going on. They figured all this stuff out. They've got happy employees. They got happy customers. And I think that what it boils down to is they're happy. They love what they do. It's apparent what they do. And now that's their children or the people that are going to take it over are seeing that too. And I think it's
contagious.
Real. It's contagious. Exactly right. It is real. Like they are happy. They love what they do. You know, like I said, I've never worked in any other profession, but the people that I work with now with the association, the successful ones, really love what they do. And we haven't even talked about the environment. And I really think that that's an opportunity for people to get involved. We're the only green industry. I preach that to the kids all the time. If you want to make a difference in the world, this is the way to do it. Mm-hmm. And I use the analogy that when Toyota comes out with a new vehicle that burns less fuel than the last one, is that green? And half the kids say yes. And I said, it's not. It's less gray, but it's not green. If you ride a bike to school, is that green? And most of them say yes. And I said, it's really not, though. It's just not gray.
Right.
Green is planting stuff and nurturing stuff and allowing things to grow. We're the only green industry. This planet needs nature-based solutions. Our waterways, our shorelines need nature-based solutions. We've gone through the process of building the banks of our waterways and our like you look at Prince Edward Island with
all of our infrastructure.
I mean, we've used the armor stone and the boulders to try to protect it, and we know that that's not the best way. The best way is to build a living shoreline. So if you want to get involved and make a difference in the planet, this is the profession to be involved in. You don't have to have a strong back if you don't.
Now, that's a really good message that everybody listening to this can take to their recruiting strategy.
Yes.
Like, we are talking about a generation who wants to make a difference and make an impact. And how many people are using the platform of the green industry is the only green industry in the world. And if you want to make a difference environmentally, start planting. I mean, there's
and you can have fun doing it.
Tons of fun doing it. So, okay. That's a really cool takeaway. And I really appreciate that, Jim. I think a lot of people are missing the boat on that perspective. I think that's a really neat way to think about things that doesn't really change anything about what people are doing, but can change meaningfully in how people are trying to recruit. Yeah. So then going back to this, the members that got it going on, your favorites, just the people that are, got this figured out. And you mentioned they're happy, but if you were to like observe their businesses, what's one or two things they've got visibly happening inside their company versus say the ones that are just like struggling, they can't make it work, they're having a hard time growing? What would you say are the contrasting kind of characteristics of the ones that got it going on versus the ones that are sitting kind of like stuck?
There's two.
Great, hit me.
Okay, so safety is a big one. So when you see the companies that are really have a really strong safety program, that tells me they care about their employees. And I mean, I go back to the 70s where safety was never a big issue. We did some stupid things that you're not allowed to do anymore. You put the guy in the bucket of the loader and you lift him up so he can reach the wire to hook. Right. Yeah, we don't do that anymore. But some have a really strong safety program. They have their tailgate meetings. If there's an issue, they fix it. So that's the big one. And I think that I've talked. It
says a lot, right?
It does. When we do safety training sessions for our members and they send their employees, some of the comments I get is, I think my boss is trying to kill me. He doesn't seem to be interested. You feel like you're a commodity. If you fall off the ladder, he's got someone else that's coming up. Right. And that's
not good.
The successful guys. My favorites are the guys that say, you're not going up that ladder without somebody tending it.
Yeah, that's cool.
And the other thing is training, and they kind of fall hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So if you're providing training for people in everything that they need to do to be successful and safe, and I've been involved with the on-the-job training program that was developed specifically for our profession, but really it's the same program that Toyota uses. Toyota and some other very successful companies, and it's learning while doing. That's another name for the program. It's the ideal way to train people, and it's really just training the trainer, showing people the best way to train people. And it goes so far beyond that, where it's about training is about documentation. If you train someone how to use a piece of equipment, say a skid steer, mm-hmm. and he flips it over and somebody gets hurt, if there's an investigation, show me when you trained him. Show me where you trained them, when you trained them, who
How you
trained them, the
trained them.
qualifications of the trainer. Otherwise, even though you say we trained this guy on the piece of equipment, there's no documentation. Ergo, the training
Didn't
never
happen.
happened. So to have that, the documentation, and if people look at this on the job training program, and each province has trainers, embrace that.
Okay, cool. So then hit me up with that one. Safety and training being the thing that the ones that got it going on are focused on and doing really well. Yep. What can members or folks listening to this do to engage with your safety and or training programs? Like what's the best way to get involved?
Google on the job training.
Straight up.
Throw the word landscape in there, because you'll find one that's specific to our landscaping program. It was developed by our industry. We put our trainers through the program. I'm a master trainer here in New Brunswick. It bothers me that I don't do enough of this training. It doesn't really cost anything. You might pay some travel if we have to go to a remote location to do it, but you get 12 people in a room. We do a 2-day on-the-job training program, and if you embrace it, it'll change the culture in your company.
I love it. And so if someone isn't a member currently, how do they become a member of Landscape New Brunswick?
Google Landscape New Brunswick or Landscape P.E.I. There's an application form there. Call me. And I've been criticized for this, but for me, if someone has an interest in becoming a member, the first thing is I want you to have an interest in what we do. I don't care if you're a member. I do, because I do want the money eventually.
Well, you got to get paid, right?
I want your contact information. I want to tell you what's coming up. I don't want you to join if you want it just to get a discount on a truck.
Sure.
If that's the reason you join, great. I say I don't care, but
it's not the purpose of the organization.
The purpose of the association is to build enough numbers that we become credible in the eyes of the people with the money, which is the government. Mm-hmm. So if we go to government and say, we'd like to get funding for this program that we want to do, how many members do you have? You got 10. They say, next. If you say you've got 200 or 250, and these are the people that we represent, then you start getting some
weight.
You carry a lot more weight. You're stronger together. I think that's what it says on the lead page on our website. It says we're stronger together, and we're stronger.
It is the truth. So one resource for you that you just love, you wish more people would read, speaker, author, presenter, what's somebody that you think is a kick-ass resource that they should check out?
Okay, I'm gonna, and I have a reason for saying the name, because you want a specific name person.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Frank Bork.
Oh, love Frank.
Okay, so Frank's from Moncton.
Yeah, he's on next. I think he's number 5.
Seriously. Yeah. Awesome. So ask him the same question, and maybe
he'll say Jim. No, but why Frank? Why should people check him out?
Yeah, well, I met Frank when he had a small company in Moncton. So he was one of our members, and he had a small little company, and he had HR problems. And he determined that training was the most important aspect of his business. And he turned that into a career of its own.
Yeah.
Not to
mention he's a cool cat.
He is. Yeah. He's a nice guy. He's an industry person. We are so fortunate that our best trainers, and I'm speaking of people like Jackie Hart and Frank and a number of other people, they're industry people through and through. Paul Zamet is another one. I mean, I've got a lot of local heroes too. Like we've got growers here in New Brunswick that I've known since I started, like Bob Osborne at Cornhill Nursery and Bobby Arsenault at Maritime Sod.
Big shout outs.
My heroes.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this, man. Like, I hope everybody listening got a lot of takeaways. The biggest one for me, and I just think it's being missed by everybody, is that if you truly, as a young person looking to find a career, want to impact the environment, there's only one green industry. And I think every landscape, nursery, greenhouse, you name it, could use that platform to engage youth to come work with them. I think that is just a really cool perspective, Jim. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great.
Cool, man. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening and watching. Depends on how you're consuming this media. But Jim, thank you so much. Executive Director, Landscape New Brunswick. You're amazing. Thanks again for doing this.
P.E.I.
And P.E.I, of course. Yeah. And P.E.I. Never forget. So check him out on LinkedIn or, just Google Landscape New Brunswick and become a member.
Give me a call.
All right, cool, man. Thanks again. See you
Thanks,
guys.
Robert.
See you, everybody.
Cheers.
The I Am Landscape Growth Podcast is brought to you by Intrigue, where passionate marketing meets predictable results for entrepreneurs. Remember to like and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. And if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please visit intriguemedia.com and click on podcasts.